Thanks for joining us, and today we're going to talk about perpetual bliss in Kriya Yoga. So in many Kriya Yoga schools, the idea of perpetual bliss is seen as a primary goal of practice. And certainly in self-realization fellowship, there's almost an obsession for these different levels of samadhi, these superconscious experience where one is in bliss. This includes both salvikalpa samadhi, when one is in a blissful state while one is in an immobilized state in meditation, and the much sought after nirvikalpa samadhi, where one is bliss in all states. And so it has almost become an obsession with Kriya yogis to be in a perpetual state of bliss, and the idea that if they're not in a state of bliss, there is something wrong. So the question is, should one be in a perpetual state of bliss? And certainly I've been asked this question before. One student who was saying that they had been extremely blissful in their meditations for many months, and then out of nowhere, the bliss just seemed to evaporate. It just seemed to disappear. So is there something wrong with their practice? They're still doing Kriya Yoga and doing all this stuff, but they're not in this state of bliss anymore. So their assumption then is that they must be doing something wrong, or Kriya Yoga must be doing something wrong. Either way, they're left in a state where they can't do very much. Now, one can get into a blissful state, and what it is when you become internalized into a state of pratyahara, which is a specialization of Kriya Yoga, and then you get into the tranquil breath, where it's also been called the breathless state, and you get into this very still state. You start to perceive the subtle energetic realm within you, and you may not have perceived that before unless you had done Kriya Yoga meditation or another meditation where you internalize. So the experience of the life force, what we will call the prana or the chi, flowing through your inner energetic architecture creates this bliss. And when it is flowing, you get into an expanded state. You may be experiencing bliss, but often what can happen is that bliss can seem to evaporate. And what it means usually is that there's something happening where the life force, the prana or chi, is not flowing in a natural way. There's something that is an impediment. And in Kriya Yoga, one of the things that they do to help to remove impediments, right, in the spinal centers, in the chakras, is they do the Om Japa practice, right? So that is certainly something that you can apply if you're running into a situation where things don't seem to be moving and your meditation is static and you feel like you've plateaued. You're not having an expansion of consciousness. You're just sort of sitting there in this static state. But really at a deeper level, the life force, the prana or chi, moves in cycles. And in Taoist internal alchemy, we talk about the natural cycle of the 5 phases. And basically this is the life force, the chi or prana, moving through the different phases. It begins with the metal phase, which moves to the water phase, and then to the wood phase, then to the fire phase, and then to the earth phase. So when the chi or prana is flowing in that harmonious phase, which we call the creation cycle in Taoist internal alchemy, there is a harmonious flow of life energy, of prana or chi within you. But when there's an impediment, the bliss, which is a byproduct of the flow of the life force, seems to dry up. Something is stopping the chi or life force prana from moving in that harmonious cycle. And the student who asked me the question about why the bliss had dried up, I asked the question, what else has happened in your life, right? With the assumption that they didn't start suddenly doing Kriya Yoga wrong, right? That there's something else must have happened. And what they said is they went through a fairly impactful breakup in an intimate relationship. And we know in Taoist internal alchemy and Chinese medicine that when chi or life force prana gets stuck in the lungs, it's usually associated with grief and sadness. So it can have an impact in the flow, that natural creation cycle. And when the energy, prana or chi, gets stuck in your lungs and isn't moving to the next phase, it's going to impact your Kriya Yoga practice. So what's the remedy for this? More Kriya? Is it more Om Japa? And certainly those are the practices that have been recommended. But the thing is that if you have emotional upheaval within you, unresolved patterns that is stopping the flow of the life force in the 5 phases, you need to deal with those patterns. And in Kriya Yoga, the use of the Om Japa technique can give you temporary relief, but a much deeper technique is something in Taoist internal alchemy, which we call fusion of the 5 elements. And that's one of the practices that we teach at Modern Kriya, along with the Kriya Yoga from the householder lineage of Panchanan Bhattacharya. We teach the Taoist internal alchemy, and a really crucial part of that is the fusion of the 5 elements, which we call emotional alchemy. And the reason why it's so effective is that one can actually target patterns inside that's stopping the free flow of the life force, prana or chi, in the 5 phases, right? So if you're having a block, a plateau in your Kriya Yoga that has an emotional connection to it and you can't get beyond it, more Kriya is not going to do the trick. What you need to do is find some way of processing that emotional blockage. And certainly there are many approaches to it, but we found with our students is that fusion of the 5 elements is one of the most effective practices for emotional alchemy, for transforming inner emotional stuff. And we all have tons and tons of this unprocessed emotional stuff within us, right? We walk around mostly being completely oblivious to it until we start reacting to things around us because the patterns are waiting there to be activated, to be triggered, right? And so no amount of Kriya Yoga is going to remove that. What you need to do is to deal with those patterns on a one-to-one basis. And so Kriya Yoga is great because you can get internalized, you can have these blissful states that emerge, but ultimately you need to deal with your issues, right? And the Taoist internal alchemy practices are so complementary with Kriya Yoga because the Kriya Yoga brings you inside and the Taoist internal alchemy allows you to start transforming things. So on the emotional level, and there are different aspects of ourselves in totality that need to be transformed for what we call whole body enlightenment. So Kriya Yoga can get you part of the way, but the Taoist internal alchemy and Kriya Yoga together is extremely effective. It brings it together like hand in glove for a toolkit that you can use for your own internal transformation. So if you're thinking that, you need to be getting into these states of bliss and being in perpetual bliss is the most important thing in Kriya Yoga, think again. And I have seen people who are in these supposed states of bliss, and I remember being, at convocation, right, the Self-Realization Fellowship convocation, and there was one woman who was having an internal experience and she was connecting, with her concept of the divine, and that's all great, right? And, I think it was Divine Mother was the connection, and it's all beautiful to see the heart open and the upper chakras, the upper energy centers open to this feeling of love and bliss. But she had to have a friend take her around by the hand everywhere because she was unable to function in the world, right? So being in a state of super perpetual bliss where you are unable to interact with the world, from my perspective, is not practical at all. We need a balance. We want to get into states of bliss, right? We want to have deep experiences. We want to have realization. We want to have enlightenment, all that kind of stuff. But we need to act in the world in a practical way. And if you run away, if you're a bliss chaser, right, you're a bliss addict, right, and some organizations, call themselves like Ananda, right, as if Ananda means bliss in Sanskrit. Ananda is the most important thing because it will dissolve all your problems. Well, I have seen people in Kriya Yoga who get so blissed out, right, in their meditation, which is nice, right, and then they come back and their rigid patterns that they have not dealt with are still there, and they deal with the world, they can't handle the world, right? And the reason is because they're rigid, their bliss experiences have not dissolved the impediments in their reactions to everything around them, right? Like the world, then they see the world as the problem, oh, I'm gonna get away from the world is crazy. Well, no, what it is that you have become so focused on bliss as the only way of being that you basically say that the whole world of problems, you can't deal with it. You're impractical. You can't try and resolve things. You can't solve problems. Like, there's a problem with that because we need to be able to solve problems. You know, environmentally, we have lots of issues on the earth, right? Socially, we have lots of issues, wars, etc. We need people who are practically minded, right, but spiritually grounded to be able to do important work to help other people, the rest of the world, universe, etc. So don't run away and be chasing bliss and saying that's the only important thing. And, you know, I'm going to run away and I'm a child of God and I don't have to do anything responsible in this world. Like, that is a major delusion. So, you know, I would suggest that you rethink it, right? And you may find yourself, you know, those states of bliss evaporating. And as I say, it's because there are patterns within you that haven't been resolved, right? So you need practical tools to be able to do that. And Kriya Yoga is great, but it needs other stuff to be truly effective as a whole body enlightenment. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.